Gimmicky characters can be rather divisive when it comes to competitive play in any game, not just Smash. What is the #1 trait required out of any player in order to be successful? It's not mechanics, it's not game knowledge, it's not talent, nor is it even time. It's consistency. Consistency is the bedrock of what makes a player perform so well and, more importantly, for so long. Naturally, that has a lot to do with deciding what character you want to play, and gimmicks tend to get in the way of that. With enough stats, and ideally in alignment with universal win conditions, you can theoretically make a gimmicky playstyle good enough to see consistent play. But more often than not, they have a tendency to sacrifice practicality in favor of whatever neat little party trick the character might have up their sleeve, adversely affecting their popularity whether it has anything to do with their placement on the tier list or not. No one can be more representative of that than Ice Climbers. Ever since their conception, the Ices have been perennially controversial among the player base for all kinds of janks, from wobbling in melee to chain grabbing in brawl to their insane desync 0-to-death combos in ultimate. Their cheesy, albeit extremely devastating win conditions are offset by double if not triple the number of problems. Aside from maybe Hara-sen and Futari in Japan, pretty much the only high-profile Ice Climbers main is our good friend Big D. And while they may have a handful of players who waste no effort lapping out all kinds of psychotic ways to one-shot you, I think we can all agree this episode is well overdue, as Ice Climbers may be among the least popular, if not the actual least popular character in the game. Let's break down what drives prospective players away from them. Where do I start? I suppose we can open with a briefing, since I'm willing to bet many of you don't even know enough about them. I don't blame you. To start, the Ice Climbers are the first and only true tag team fighters in the game, not to be confused with tandem attackers like Rosalina or swap-out fighters like Pokemon Trainer and Deaches. Popo and Nana are for all intents and purposes completely identical in regards to attacks and whatnot, but are a lot more different than meets the eye. The one difference everyone is aware of is that Nana is technically autonomous, emulating what Popo does with a 7-frame delay. Otherwise, she's entirely operated by a CPU, but you're basically in control of two characters at the same time. Aside from that, Nana is a little bit faster than Popo, or vice versa depending on the skin you choose. For the sake of this video, we'll assume Popo is in front and Nana follows. Anyways, when the two are separated, you'll notice Nana is actually quite fast compared to when they're together. In addition, she does less damage, takes more damage, and is knocked back more easily. Piloting what is essentially two characters for the price of one, even with the damage reduction in effect, one of the biggest aspects of Ice Climbers is how quickly they can rack up damage, provided both attacks connect. Anytime you get forward tilted, you get hit by 2 forward tilts. Anytime you get forward smashed, you get hit by 2 forward smashes. This can make them deceptively scary to deal with and disadvantage, as you'll find yourself going from 0 to 90 in just a few hits. Another aspect of their echoed cadence that works to their advantage is the fact that their opponent has to be wary of 2 attacks, which can make timing, spacing, and other facets of the game extremely ambiguous. For example, you might try to punish Popo for hitting your shield, but if you fire back too quickly, you'll be smacked right in the face by Nana, inadvertently giving Ice Climbers some of the safest attacks on shield in the game. That is, if your only concern is whether or not Popo will be safe. We'll touch on that later in the video. With Nana acting 7 frames after Popo, she actually makes the need for timing attacks more lenient. If say you're trying to 2-frame your opponent with down tilt but miss with Popo, Nana might be able to get them. Or if you're trying to tag chase on a platform with up air and swing too early, Nana can extend your threat bubble and strike your opponent anyway. The extent of their joint coverage is almost unlimited when you account for their endless repertoire of desync combos, the cornerstone of all high-level Ice Climbers play. Desyncing allows a player to manipulate Nana into acting slower than the usual 7 frames, utilizing the AI behavior that takes over Nana when the two are sufficiently far enough away, as well as the game's buffer system. You can delay the follow-up action long enough to where Popo can input an entirely different move while Nana is in the middle of the previous one, allowing for creative and catastrophic setups and combos that only they can do. Not even Rosalina and Luma can achieve the same capacity of plays that Ice Climbers can make. So while the removal of chain grabs and by extension wobbling has taken a crucial win condition out of their arsenal, it's been replaced with almost limitless ways to f your opponents up. Unfortunately, the very part of their design that drives their appeal is also what hinders that appeal from ever being acknowledged by any more than an infinitesimal fraction of the player base. The sheer height of their skill ceiling, if it can even be quantified, has given them a reputation for being allegedly the hardest character in the game to master. Watching all the ridiculous combo clips and setups on Ice Climbers may be a great source of entertainment, but it also paints them in a very arduous light, as if to be good on the character, you have to consistently perform these mechanically intensive combo strings, and to some extent that's kind of true. Not saying you can't make use of fundies, but that's actually what makes them so daunting for prospective players. With all due respect to Kazuya mains, the privilege afforded to you, such as the copious intangibility frames on his moves being one of the heaviest characters in the game, followed by rather consistent 0-to-death combo trees, with branches I might add, lets you pretty much disregard what your opponent is doing in response to you half of the time. While he is subjectively difficult to play, the lowered risk and increased reward make him appear more forgiving, which is why one might prefer to main him instead of Ices. That's not to say you don't need fundies to play Kazuya, but the margin for error is significantly more generous on him for the aforementioned reasons. Moreover, the same game plan can be applied to virtually the entire cast, not so much the case for ICs. Compounding that imposing difficulty is the unique property of having two fighters. As I established in Will's episode last year, having to pilot what is effectively two characters adds an entire extra layer of micromanagement you have to be aware of. And though that comes with a lot of options at your disposal, package deal fighters are often balanced around necessitating masterful use of both parts to achieve an ideal result, rather than the option to use both, which can turn off players especially when they don't have complete control over their companion. For most people, the idea of two fighters feels more like a con than a pro, where twice or even thrice the number of options is cancelled out by twice the amount of work you have to put in. Again, with enough overtuning and quality of life features, a two-part fighter can override that less than pleasant aspect, such as Aegis. Simply put, ice climbers are an acquired taste. Unlike your typical popular fighters like Cloud, Samus, or Roy who can be used almost immediately after being picked up, it takes a lot of work and practice just to get off the ground with Ices, perhaps too much work, and a lot of that has to do with the absence of a clear strategy, some kind of bread and butter game plan that can apply to the majority of the cast. What made wobbling and chain grabbing so effective in Melee and Brawl respectively was that it worked against pretty much everyone. The hard part was getting your hands on them, but once you did, it was a single player game from then on. Looking at the ridiculous combo clips gives off the impression of a busted character, but that only shows you all of the times they succeed, not the many times they fail. From an experiential standpoint, it's hard to get prospective players to consider them as a worthwhile candidate to main, let alone commit the full distance. Some may experiment or even humor the notion of trying them out for a short while, but don't stick with it long enough to actually produce results. 1 out of every 100 players already try out ice climbers, and 1 out of every 100 of that 1 out of every 100 commits to it all the way through. Now, if it were merely a question of commitment, then that shouldn't be too big of a hurdle, right? Gamers, especially in PvP titles, are willing to put in ungodly amounts of hours grinding, even if it means getting a 1% advantage over the competition. So even if a character is difficult, provided the benefit puts them at a level above everyone else, they would still take it. But that's where we run into the practical side of ice climbers' problems. They're not at a level above the competition. Statistically, the deck is stacked against them most of the time, even if as a spectator it doesn't look like it is. While not Jigglypuff or Pichu levels so frail, they're on the lighter side in terms of durability, although still considered middleweight. They also have average to subpar physics overall, again not as bad as someone like Incineroar, but noticeable enough to negatively influence their gameplay. Furthermore, while you don't have to worry too much about Popo exploding off a few hits, you do have to worry about Nana, since remember, she takes more damage and is easier to kill than her partner. In the Rosa video, I explained how Luma mainly serves as her sword, augmenting her offensive capabilities, but in some ways, Luma is also her shield, not only being able to seek surface for her, but using that aggression to cover for her vulnerability in a best defense is a strong offense type of way. Ice climbers take that philosophy to the utmost extreme, where Nana is not only the source of your strength, but your source of survival as well, meaning if anything were to happen to her, it would also affect Popo, and unlike Luma, you won't be getting her back if she dies. Losing Nana compromises all aspects of ice climbers' pressure, from their damage output and KO potential to neutral and disadvantage. What makes it so frustrating is how easy it is for you to lose her. On top of suffering more damage and knockback, it's extremely easy to just attack Nana and get her out of the fight, as the player is unable to act for her, especially while separated. It would be one thing if you could still control your partner, kind of like how Rosa can pilot Luma from halfway across the stage, but when the CPU takes over, the only thing it does is guide her back to her partner. Disregarding anything taking place, she's not programmed to air dodge, shield, or even attack on her own. The only thing she does is run, or at least try to run back to Popo, during which your opponent can rack up a ton of damage or knock her out of the fight altogether, dooming Popo to the same eventual fate. Yes, there are memes about how Sopo is the best character in the game, but in all seriousness, Sopo is without question the worst character in the game. Don't say Solomar, that's a choice. Without Nana, you do far less damage, have far less kill power, your attacks go from being near unpunishable on shield to now being easily punishable. Squallhammer's mobility is drastically reduced, you lose access to desyncs, and most importantly, your recovery. This makes ice climbers heavily reliant on keeping the partner alive, someone who you don't have direct control over. Through no fault of your own, you could be forced into a disadvantageous position purely because your partner got hit. For example, you might have to run off stage and use Belay to save Nana, but that puts you in a ledge trap situation. Or even on stage, by trying to run after Nana to link up together, it could potentially put you in danger. There are specific scenarios where yes, you can use Nana as bait, but most of the time the bulk of their difficulty and learning curve stems from learning how to best keep both you and your partner safe. Far easier said than done. Remember that while together, Nana acts typically 7 frames after Popo, Offensively, this is fantastic since it extends your threat window, but defensively, it can put you in jeopardy. If you recall what I said about Ice Climbers having some of the safest attacks in the game and how that's assuming you only care about Popo getting hit, that's what we'll get into here. Take a look at their aerial attack frame data and notice how some of them are actually positive on shield. For clarification, it's positive for Popo, not for Nana. In fact, it's super easy to punish her out of shield because of that delay, and we just talked about how you want to keep her alive as much as you want to keep yourself alive. Desyncing can actually worsen this too, as it lengthens the reaction time between Popo and Nana, which means defensive options like air dodging, jumping, and shielding are significantly delayed. Even when you're not desynced, or at the very least not trying to, over time that delay in action can result in Nana getting poked many times, especially in neutral. Say you're trying to get close to your opponent and do a run-up shield to block an attack. You may have successfully blocked the move, but the induced shield lag will extend the hitbox to then strike Nana, who's still in her dash animation, so even though you made the right defensive play, you can still lose that interaction simply because Nana was too slow. Short effective range and poor physics are already a big hurdle to overcome, but Nana's frailty makes it all the more onerous. It takes a very careful, disciplined, and patient playstyle to not only win neutral against your opponent, but to also protect your partner. This is exactly why they have no bread and butter game plan against the entire cast. For every opponent, you have to devise an almost exclusive strategy against them and only them. One fighter may be easy to get in on, but they can mess up Nana. Another fighter can exploit the hitbox extension I talked about earlier via hit lag to make their attacks more deadly, so on and so forth. With this in mind, Ice Climbers are more dependent on making the most out of every neutral win than the average character, since the more they have to play neutral, the more vulnerable they are, ultimately making them feel like a touch of death character, not out of convenience but out of necessity. The reason they have so many crazy 0 to death combos is due to the fact that in some matchups, if they get a grab or land a hit on their opponent, that person better be dead, since there's no guarantee you'll get a second chance. In the past, one neutral interaction was all they needed, grab them and that was their stock. You don't have that privilege in Ultimate anymore. Several members of the cast are able to completely wall out Ices through projectiles or disjoints, exploiting their poor mobility and lack of camping options. Technically, they do have a projectile in the form of neutral B, but 1, it is almost no knockback so you can't kill with it, and 2, hitting the thing sends it right back so you can use their own projectile against them. Comparing them to the other two infamous touch of death characters, Kazuya and Luigi, Luigi has fireballs, which aren't that much, but certainly more effective at getting people to approach you. In addition, he has the tether grab, whose Zair can clang with grounded moves, thus giving him an easy grab. Kazuya may not have a spammable projectile, but he has a reflector for enemy projectiles, and a spammable full body intangibility combo starter that's safe on shield and can challenge even disjoints. Plus, crouch dashing makes him decently fast on the ground. Most of the time, to approach with Ices in neutral, it's a slow battle of attrition, gradually inching forward on your opponent with Dice Shot, Blizzard, and Squall Hammer to gain stage control and eventually land that grab or first hit on your opponent. And you have to do that while protecting your completely helpless partner, while timing your desync, while making sure you're executing the right setup and combo. There are just too many things you have to keep track of for roughly the same, if not less, overall reward than other 0 to death characters, and from a fundies perspective, they're far from proficient in that regard too. In totality, Ice Climbers have arguably the hardest barrier to entry out of any character. The presence of 2 characters raises their skill floor higher than some fighters' skill ceilings, while at the same time having a very situational moveset and severe handicaps when you lose your partner, with the payoff not being worthwhile enough to offset the work you have to put in. At times, they can feel like the most overpowered characters in the game, but like I said at the start of the video, it's not about how high your peaks are, it's about if you can reach those peaks consistently. That's why I have so much respect for Big D. He found a way to be consistent on a character that is intrinsically inconsistent. Empirically, however, not everyone can do that. Although that can be a silver lining, since no one plays Ice Climbers, that means no one knows how to fight them either. Food for thought. Anyways, that's gonna be it for today. Let me know your thoughts on Ice Climbers in the comments down below, whether you agree or disagree with my points. Shoutouts to Big D for helping me with this video, by the way. But if you enjoyed, it would be great if you left a like and subscribed. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Why No One Plays episodes if you haven't yet. Till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.